Jesus said no one can serve two masters. Either you'll love one and hate the other, or be loyal to one and have contempt for the other. He said you cannot serve both God and money. Jesus talked a lot about masters and lords, kings and kingdoms, and sometimes this language is hard for us to connect with because we don't talk much about masters and lords. We don't have a king or live in a kingdom. But my friend Stephen taught me a lot about what it means to have a master. Well, I guess I would say he taught me a lot about what it means to have one master. The first time I met Stephen, he was walking in the back of our sanctuary. He was about 10 minutes late, and his arrival had caught my attention. At the time, I was serving in a church that had a beautiful, historic sanctuary, stained glass, a pipe organ. I was wearing a robe with a stole around my neck. And Stephen caught my attention because he looked different from the others that were in the room. He was wearing a black ball cap, a black Metallica shirt, black shorts, and yeah, you guessed it, black shoes. He made his way down that long middle aisle, right to the front, to the second row. He was carrying a cup of coffee, and while we were standing singing a hymn, Stephen sat down, propped his feet up on the row in front of him, and just kind of watched us. It was like he was in a museum, and he was going to sit there and watch while whatever was happening happened. I began to pray for this young man, fearing that one of the ushers would rappel out of the balcony and wrestle him to the ground, but it turns out he was safe. And he sat there throughout the service, but before I could catch him, as the service ended, Stephen made his way out of the back. He came back the next week, though, and the next week, and the next week. Each time, the same scene, same black ball cap, same Metallica shirt, and shorts, and tennis shoes, and the cup of coffee. Right there on the second row, he would sit and listen. But by that fourth week, at the end of the service, instead of walking out, he walked up. And he came forward where we had these comfy pads where you could kneel down and pray. And Stephen did just that, just like he knew what he was supposed to do. I saw tears streaming down his face and running off the end of his nose. This time we did get a chance to talk, and the next day we went to lunch. I asked Stephen, "What do you think about Jesus?" His answer surprised me. He said, "Up until a few weeks ago, I had never even heard of him." Now, I talk about Jesus a lot, but our conversation took on a whole new feel as I began to share with someone who had never heard about Jesus, about my master. I told Stephen that Jesus associated with those whom the church had pushed away, how Jesus was always among those who felt disconnected from God, how he was criticized for it, and he didn't seem to care. I told Stephen about how Jesus went to parties and how he hung out with his friends on fishing boats. I told him how he washed some guy's feet and how he carried a cross up a hill. I told him about an empty tomb that his friends found one Sunday morning. In the midst of that, some weeks into our conversations, Stephen said, "I want Jesus to be the master of my life," or Lord, or King, however you want to say it. And then Stephen, who didn't know any better, began to live a focused and soul devotion to his master. One Saturday, Stephen joined us for a work project for a family in our community who was in need. The next morning, he called me early and said, "Whose house are we going to work on today?" I said, "What do you mean, Stephen? That was just our Saturday project." And he said, "Oh, I just figured we would do something like that every day." Another night late, he called me, and he was outside the door of one of his friends' apartments. He said they'd had an argument earlier that day, and he had shown up at her door with a basin of water and some towels, and he was there to ask for her forgiveness and wash her feet. He said, "She won't let me in," and I said, "Yeah, she probably won't." You get the point. Stephen was taking this Jesus thing really seriously. His focus on him was undying, and it affected the way that I thought about Jesus and the way that I looked at my life. I mean, Stephen said Jesus served the poor, so why don't we do that? Jesus washed people's feet, and so why don't we do that? He was taking this master thing really seriously. It affected how he looked at everything. For Stephen, to have Jesus as his master affected the way he looked at his time, his relationships, his money. And for me, it affected how I looked at Jesus as my master, my king, in the kingdom that I live in. So often I seem to serve more than one master. Sometimes the master is money, sometimes the master is me. I don't kick Jesus out, but I certainly scoot him over to make room for more. But Jesus said, no one can serve two masters. Either you love the one and hate the other, or you're loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You can't serve both God and money. As we work for money, it can quickly become something that we serve, something that we give our lives to. It can become a master. So how many masters do you have? How many are you trying to squeeze in? In full lives, we are pulled to devotion to many different things. Jesus said, you can't serve both God and money. I can't. Can you?